Let me tell you something nobody in personal finance is being completely honest with you about. Most don't invest videos show you some scary compound interest chart, wag their finger at you, and call it a day. That's lazy, that's incomplete, and honestly, it's doing you a disservice. What I'm going to show you today is different. I'm going to walk you through every single decade of your life, your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, and beyond, and show you exactly, specifically, mechanically what happens to your money when you choose not to invest. Not just, you'll have less money, I mean the exact mechanisms, the exact ways your life quietly falls apart, the invisible tax you pay, the invisible ceiling that closes in on you year after year. And I'm going to include things nobody else is talking about, like the neurological reason non-investors make worse financial decisions over time, the silent inflation trap that most people don't even know they're in, and the one number that determines whether your non-investing choice eventually becomes irreversible. Stay until the end because the 50s section is the one that will keep you up at night. Before we dive in, let's define our terms clearly because I want to be precise with you. Never investing in this video means you earn money, you keep it in a savings account, a checking account, maybe some cash under the mattress, but you never put it in stocks, bonds, index funds, real estate, a 401k, an IRA, or any asset that has the potential to grow beyond a fixed low interest rate. Now, is that really as common as we think? Shockingly, yes. According to a 2023 Gallup poll, only 61% of Americans own stock. That means roughly 4 in 10 Americans have zero market exposure whatsoever. And when you break that down by income, among Americans earning less than $40,000 a year, only about 28% own any stock at all. A 2020 Federal Reserve survey found that the bottom 50% of Americans by wealth hold less than 1% of total stock market wealth in the United States. So this isn't a hypothetical. This is the reality for tens of millions of people, and most of them don't fully understand what they're signing up for. Let's go through it age by age. You're 22. You just got your first real job. You're making, let's say, $45,000 a year. After taxes, you take home around $3,000 a month. You're paying rent, maybe some student debt, your car insurance. You've got maybe $300 to $500 left over each month. You think, I'll start investing when I have more money. When things settle down. When I know more about it. And here's where the first invisible tax kicks in. Let me explain what I mean by that. The real cost of not investing in your 20s is not just the money you don't make, it is the mathematical compounding window you permanently destroy. Here's the hard data. A $5,000 investment at age 22, earning the S&P 500's average historical return of approximately 10% annually, becomes roughly $226,000 by age 65. That same $5,000 invested at age 32 becomes approximately $87,000. Same money, same return rate. A difference of over $139,000 from waiting just 10 years. Now scale that up. If you invest $200 per month starting at age 22, by the time you're 65, you'd have approximately $1.5 million. If you wait until 32 to start doing the same thing, you end up with around $580,000. You didn't just miss out on some gains, you lost nearly $1 million by waiting 1 decade. But here's the unique point nobody tells you about your 20s. The damage isn't only financial, it's behavioral. There is documented psychological research, specifically studies on what behavioral economists call financial identity formation, that shows the habits you build around money in your early 20s tend to calcify. A 2017 study published in the Journal of Consumer Research found that people who develop passive, savings-only money behaviors in early adulthood were significantly less likely to change those behaviors later in life, even when their income substantially increased. In other words, every year you spend in your 20s not investing, you're not just losing compound growth, you are hardwiring your brain to treat investing as something that is not for you. You're building a psychological identity as a non-investor, and that identity becomes one of the hardest things to break. The other thing happening in your 20s that nobody talks about? Lifestyle inflation is already working against you. You got a $5,000 raise, your rent went up, you bought a nicer car, your subscriptions multiplied. The money you saved for investing quietly dissolved into a slightly more comfortable lifestyle. Meanwhile, inflation is running at an average of roughly 3% per year. If your savings account gives you 0.5%, which was the national average for most of the 2010, you are losing purchasing power every single year. Not in theory, in practice. That $10,000 you have sitting in a savings account in 2015 has the purchasing power of roughly $8,100 in 2025 dollars. You didn't save $10,000. You saved $8,100 and didn't even notice the difference disappearing. Your 30s are where the non-investing decision stops being abstract and starts having a physical address. You might have a mortgage now, maybe kids, maybe both. Your expenses have structurally increased, meaning they aren't discretionary anymore. You can't just cut back on your mortgage or your daycare bill. The average American in their early 30s has a net worth of approximately $35,000 according to the Federal Reserve's 2022 Survey of Consumer Finances. But if you strip out home equity, the house you're still paying a mortgage on, that number drops to close to zero or even negative for many people. Here's the unique point for your 30s. The risk profile of your non-investing decision changes completely. When you were in your 20s and not investing, you were losing future gains. In your 30s, you begin losing resilience. What do I mean? If you had been investing since your 20s, even modestly, say $200 a month for 10 years in an index fund, you'd have somewhere in the neighborhood of $38,000 to $45,000 sitting in a portfolio. That portfolio is not just wealth. It is your emergency buffer that actually keeps pace with inflation. It is the down payment you can access without destroying your retirement. It is the thing that prevents you from putting a medical emergency on a credit card at 24% APR. The non-investor in their 30s doesn't have that buffer. So when the inevitable happens, a job loss, a medical bill, a car dying, a roof that needs replacing, they go into debt, credit card debt, high-interest personal loans, and the mathematical devastation of carrying high-interest debt while having no invested assets is severe. A $10,000 credit card balance at 22% APR costs you approximately $2,200 per year in interest alone. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 is averaging around 10% annually. So you're not just not earning 10%, you are paying 22% on debt. Your real financial deficit compared to an investor in the same situation is 32 percentage points per year. And here is the sneaky part. The non-investor in their 30s often feels fine. They're earning more than they ever have. They're meeting their obligations. Their credit score is decent. Nothing feels urgently wrong. The damage is entirely invisible. It's happening in a parallel universe where their invested self is getting quietly, dramatically richer, while their non-invested self is treading water. The gap between the investor and the non-investor in their 30s isn't just money, it's optionality. The investor in their mid-30s with a growing portfolio can consider changing careers, starting a business, taking a sabbatical, moving cities, because they have a financial cushion. The non-investor can't. Every major life decision runs through the filter of, can I afford to do this? The answer, more often than not, is no. The 40s are where the reality starts to land. Most people in their 40s start, for the first time, thinking seriously about retirement. And when the non-investor sits down with a calculator and runs the numbers for the first time at age 42, 43, 44, it is, without exaggeration, often a financially traumatic experience. Here's what the math looks like. Let's say you're 42. You want to retire at 65. That's 23 years away. You have $15,000 saved, no investments, just savings. The average American your age who has been investing has roughly $135,000 in retirement savings, according to Vanguard's 2023 How America Saves report, to catch up from $15,000 to reach a basic retirement goal of $1 million by age 65, which financial planners widely recommend as a minimum for a comfortable retirement. You would need to save and invest approximately $2,100 per month for the next 23 years, assuming a 7% annual return, every month, without fail. For over 2 decades, the median household income in America is about $74,000 a year, roughly $6,200 a month before taxes. Saving $2,100 a month would represent around 34% of gross income before you've paid rent, food, utilities, insurance, or any other human need. For most non-investors hitting 40, the retirement math is simply impossible without dramatically changing their income. This is the first moment in the journey where the non-investing decision stops being a mistake you can correct and starts being a permanent structural reality you have to navigate around. Here's a point that is genuinely unique and underreported. The 40s are also where non-investors experience measurable psychological consequences that go beyond stress. A 2019 study from the American Psychological Association found that financial insecurity is one of the top 3 stressors reported by adults aged 35 to 54, and chronic financial stress has documented effects on cognitive performance, specifically on working memory, long-term planning ability, and impulse control. This creates a feedback loop. The financial stress caused by not having invested makes it harder to think clearly about financial decisions, which leads to more bad financial decisions, which creates more stress. Some researchers call this the scarcity trap, a term popularized by economists Sendhil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir. When your brain is preoccupied with financial scarcity, you have less cognitive bandwidth for everything else. You make worse decisions at work, you're more likely to take short-term, high-cost financial solutions because your brain can't process long-term optimization when it's in survival mode. This is not weakness, this is neuroscience. And it is a direct consequence of the non-investing path. There's also a career dimension people ignore. Investors in their 40s with substantial portfolios have leverage in their careers. They can afford to say no to unreasonable employers, negotiate harder, take calculated professional risks. The non-investor with no financial cushion cannot. They stay in bad jobs, they accept unfair compensation, they don't negotiate because they can't afford to walk away. The financial insecurity bleeds into their professional identity. And over time, it costs them an income too. I told you to stay until the 50s section. Here it is. If you have arrived at your 50s without any meaningful investment portfolio, you are facing a set of converging problems that most financial content doesn't have the honesty to describe plainly. Problem 1. Time is almost gone. At 52 with no investments, you have roughly 13 years until traditional retirement age. If you start investing $500 a month right now, which is genuinely difficult for someone who has never had investment discipline, at 7% annual return, you will have approximately $120,000 at 65. The average Social Security retirement benefit as of 2024 is $1,907 per month. If you have $120,000 in savings and investments, financial advisors generally recommend withdrawing no more than 4% per year. That's $4,800 per year or $400 a month from your savings. So your total retirement income would be roughly $2,307 a month, before Medicare, prescription costs, or any emergency. The federal poverty line for a single person in 2024 is approximately $1,255 a month, so you'd be above poverty. But you would have absolutely zero financial margin. One major health event, a surgery, a cancer diagnosis, a long-term care need, and you are wiped out completely. Problem 2. Healthcare is a time bomb. This is the hidden destroyer that kills non-investors in their 50s. Healthcare costs for retirees are staggering. Fidelity estimates that the average couple retiring at 65 in 2023 will need approximately $315,000 set aside just for healthcare costs in retirement, not including long-term care. For a single person, that figure is around $157,500. The non-investor at 65 with $120,000 in savings would need 100% of that money just to cover healthcare alone, leaving literally nothing for housing, food, transportation, or life. Problem 3. The Social Security shortfall is real and worsening. Here's a data point that most people in their 50s are not factoring into their plans. The Social Security Trustees 2023 report projects that the Social Security Trust Fund could be depleted by 2033. If that happens, benefits would be cut by an estimated 23% across the board. The non-investor who is planning to survive on Social Security is planning on a system that may deliver significantly less than they expect, starting possibly within the decade of their retirement. Problem 4. And this one is uniquely underreported. The catch-up contribution illusion. The IRS allows people over 50 to make catch-up contributions to retirement accounts, an extra $7,500 per year into a 401k beyond the standard $23,000 limit as of 2024. Financial media loves to mention this as a solution for people who haven't saved enough. Here is the brutal truth. The people who most need catch-up contributions are the least able to use them. To max out a 401k plus catch-up contributions in your 50s, you'd need to contribute $30,500 per year, roughly $2,540 per month. The majority of non-investors in their 50s are not making the kind of income where this is remotely feasible while also covering their existing obligations. The catch-up contribution is real, but it is mathematically designed for high earners who are slightly behind, not for lifelong non-investors. Treating it as a genuine solution for that population is dishonest. By your 60s, the game is largely over in terms of wealth accumulation. You don't have enough time for compound growth to do meaningful work. What you have is what you have, with minor additions. But here's what most content misses. The 60s aren't just about money. They're about choices or the complete elimination of them. The non-investor at 65 cannot retire. Not comfortably, not for most people with minimal savings. According to a 2023 Employee Benefit Research Institute survey, 40% of workers say they expect to retire later than they had planned, with financial unpreparedness cited as the primary reason. You will work longer, possibly into your late 60s or early 70s. This would be fine if work at that age were equally accessible and equally compensating, but it isn't. Age discrimination in hiring is illegal but widely practiced and notoriously difficult to prosecute. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that unemployed workers over 55 spend an average of 40 weeks looking for work, compared to 24 weeks for workers aged 25 to 54. The non-investor at 65 who gets laid off faces a genuine survival crisis. And the statistics bear this out. 15% of adults aged 65 and older are currently living in poverty or near poverty conditions in the United States, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation analysis of census data. There is also a dignity dimension here that is rarely spoken about in financial content but is absolutely real. Depending financially on adult children, government assistance, or charity in your 60s and 70s is not just economically painful, it is psychologically corrosive in ways that compound over time. Depression rates among financially insecure elderly Americans are significantly higher than among their financially stable counterparts. Let me give you 3 points that virtually no financial channel is talking about. Point 1. Non-investing creates an invisible inheritance cycle. The children of lifelong non-investors don't just inherit less money, they inherit a non-investing mindset. A 2020 study from the University of Wisconsin found that parental investment behavior is one of the strongest predictors of a child's adult investment behavior, even after controlling for income and education level. When you choose not to invest, you are almost certainly passing that behavioral pattern to your children. The poverty you create isn't just yours, it is structurally transmitted to the next generation. Your non-investing decision today is, statistically speaking, your child's starting handicap. Point 2. The gender dimension is severely understated. Women who do not invest face a compounded version of this problem that men don't. Women live, on average, about 5 years longer than men, meaning they need retirement savings that last longer. Women are also more likely to take career breaks for caregiving, reducing both their income and their Social Security credits. And historical wage gaps mean that even women who do save are saving a percentage of a smaller base. A woman who reaches 65 with no investments faces a life expectancy potentially extending to 87 or 88, meaning she needs income for 22 or more years on the savings she has at retirement, compared to roughly 17 years for the average man. The non-investing penalty for women over a lifetime is not the same as for men. It is measurably worse. Point 3. The inflation adjustment your savings account can't make. Here's a calculation that almost nobody talks about, clearly. The real return on a savings account, meaning after inflation, has been negative for most of the last 15 years. When savings account rates are 0.5% and inflation is 3%, your real return is negative 2.5%. You're not preserving money. You're slowly liquidating it while watching the numbers stay the same. From January 2010 to January 2025, cumulative inflation in the United States totaled approximately 50%, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics CPI data. If you had $50,000 in a savings account in 2010 and never added to it, the purchasing power of that money today, even if the nominal dollar amount is higher, is equivalent to roughly $33,500 in 2010 dollars. You didn't save $50,000 over 15 years, you slowly lost $16,500 in real value while watching the number in your account appear stable. That is the inflation trap in its most concrete form. And non-investors live in it their entire lives. I want to be fair here because some people will push back on this video with the following arguments. Let me address them directly. The first, 1. Investing is risky. I could lose everything. This is true for individual stocks and speculative investments. It is essentially false for broad, diversified index funds held over long periods. The S&P 500 has never had a 20-year negative return in its history. Not through the Great Depression, not through the 2008 financial crisis, not through the dot-com crash. The risk of investing in a diversified index fund over a multi-decade period is real but dramatically overstated. The risk of not investing over a multi-decade period is mathematically certain and dramatically understated. The second one, I don't make enough money to invest. This is the most understandable objection, and for some people, genuinely low-income people, people in genuine financial crisis, it deserves real compassion. But for most people making this argument, the reality is that it's not a lack of money, it's a lack of priority. Fractional share investing, micro-investing apps, and employer-matched 401ks mean that the barrier to entry for investing has essentially been reduced to zero. You can begin investing $10 a month. It won't make you rich, but it builds the habit, the identity, and the account that you can add to over time. The third one, the market could crash right before I retire. This is a real risk, and it's why diversification and asset allocation, shifting from stocks to more conservative investments as you approach retirement, exists as a strategy. This is not a reason not to invest. This is a reason to invest intelligently. There is one number every non-investor needs to know, 72. It's the rule of 72. Divide 72 by your annual return rate, and you get the number of years it takes your money to double. At a 7% return, your money doubles every 10.3 years. At a 10% return, your money doubles every 7.2 years. Now flip it. Apply this to inflation's effect on your savings. At 3% inflation, your purchasing power halves every 24 years. Every 24 years, sitting on cash means you've cut your real wealth in half, silently, without spending a single dollar. And here's where this gets existential. The point of irreversibility for most non-investors is around age 52. That's the age at which the combination of remaining working years, achievable savings rates, and investment growth potential becomes insufficient to produce a comfortable retirement without either a major income windfall or a dramatic reduction in retirement expectations. After 52, you can still make things better. You can still reduce damage, but you cannot fully correct for a lifetime of non-investing through rational financial behavior alone. The math doesn't close. This is not to make you despair if you're over 52 and haven't invested. It is to give you an honest picture of where you are so you can make the most intelligent decisions possible from this point forward, including dramatically reducing expenses, maximizing Social Security by delaying claims until 70, and making even small investments that give you something over nothing. Let me bring this home. Not investing is not a neutral choice. It is an active decision with specific, measurable, documented consequences at every stage of your life. In your 20s, you pay the compounding tax and build a non-investor identity. In your 30s, you lose resilience and optionality. In your 40s, you face a mathematical correction that is almost impossible to complete. In your 50s, the window begins to close and the consequences become structural. In your 60s, you live with what you built, or didn't build. There's one more thing I want to leave you with, because this video is about honesty, not terror. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. That's not a motivational poster. That's math. Whatever age you are watching this, the decision you make this week, this month, this year still matters. A 50-year-old who starts investing $300 a month in an index fund for 15 years will have roughly $100,000 to $120,000 at 65. That is not a comfortable retirement, but it is $100,000 more than they'd have if they continued doing nothing. Every dollar invested today beats every dollar not invested today. That is the only thing you need to know. If this video was useful to you, not comforting, not nice, but actually useful, subscribe, because that's the only kind of content I make here.